The alien council chamber was large and bright, filled with shining walls of silver and blue lights. Leaders from many alien worlds sat in tall chairs, their faces calm but proud. At the center of the hall stood a woman with pale golden skin and sharp, glowing eyes. She was known as Commander Soraya, leader of the Valari people, a race who believed they were stronger and wiser than most in the galaxy. The chamber doors opened with a heavy sound and every alien turned their head. A human walked in, his steps slow but steady. He wore a dark jacket torn from travel, and his face showed long hours without rest. Some aliens whispered to each other, surprised that a human was allowed to speak in this high council. The man stopped at the center, right in front of Commander Soraya. He bowed slightly, but his eyes were cold and serious. "My name is Captain Elias," he said in a firm voice, "and I bring a warning." The hall went quiet. Aliens leaned forward in their seats. Curious but doubtful, Soraya tilted her head, studying him with a faint smile. She had seen humans before, always small groups wandering the stars, always fighting with limited tools, always weaker than her own kind. "A warning?" Soraya asked, her voice calm but filled with pride. "From a human?" Laughter rose from some of the other leaders. They thought it was a joke. A small species trying to sound important. Captain Elias did not laugh. His voice grew sharper. "A storm is coming. Not of nature, but of war. An enemy older than your people, stronger than any single fleet. They are moving through the dark between stars, and soon they will strike." The room filled with murmurs. One leader shook his head. Another waved a hand as if swatting away a fly. Soraya leaned back in her chair, her smile unbroken. "You expect us to believe this?" she said. "That some hidden force will appear only because a human says so?" Elias stared at her, his eyes full of quiet fire. "I have seen their scouts," he said. "I have seen whole colonies destroyed without a trace. I barely escaped with my crew alive. You sit here in your shining halls. But your walls will not save you when they arrive." The chamber felt colder. But still, most leaders dismissed him. One alien scoffed loudly. "Humans fear shadows and call them monsters," another added. "Always telling stories to make themselves look brave." But Elias did not stop. He stepped closer to Soraya's throne and lowered his voice, making it heavy with warning. "Your pride blinds you, Commander. You think humans are weak. But weakness is not in asking for help. It is in refusing to prepare when the enemy comes. They will not ask if you are ready. They will simply burn everything you love." For the first time, Soraya's smile faded just a little, her eyes narrowed, and the hall grew silent again. There was something in his tone, something that carried the weight of truth, yet she refused to bow to fear. "You speak well, human," she said slowly. "But words are only words. You bring no proof? No captured enemy, no broken ship, only stories and fear." She stood tall, her golden armor shining under the lights. "The Valari do not tremble because of shadows. We do not run from whispers in the dark." Elias clenched his fists, his jaw tight. He could see that his words were breaking against her pride like waves against a wall. Still, he made one last attempt, his voice low, urgent, almost a plea. "If you ignore me, your people will pay in blood." "Remember this moment, Commander, when fire falls from the sky. Remember the human who tried to warn you?" Silence followed. Every leader in the chamber felt the weight of those words. But Soraya lifted her chin and turned her back to him. "The council has heard enough," she said coldly. "Take this human away. We have greater matters to discuss." Two guards stepped forward, tall and armored. They placed their hands on Elias's shoulders. Ready to lead him out, he did not fight. He only looked one last time at Soraya, his eyes filled with pity, not anger. "Your pride will be your downfall," he whispered. "And when the day comes, I will not be surprised." The doors closed behind him, leaving the chamber quiet once more. Soraya stood before her council, proud and certain. She believed humans were small, noisy creatures, too weak to guide great empires. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice of doubt echoed. Why did his words feel heavier than lies? Why did his eyes carry the look of a man who had truly seen death in the stars? She ignored it. She laughed again with her counsel, brushing away the warning, but in the cold distance of space, far beyond their sight, dark shapes were already moving. Silent hunters gliding between the stars, preparing for war, and soon, the Valari would learn the price of ignoring the humans' warning. The days after the council meeting were filled with laughter among the Valari. They mocked the humans' warning, calling it nothing more than fear dressed as prophecy. Commander Soraya stood tall in her golden armor, proud of her choice to dismiss him. To her, the Valari were strong. Their fleets were vast, their technology unmatched. Why should they listen to a tired human with broken clothes and desperate eyes? But not long after, small whispers of unease began to appear. It started with the stars themselves. Valari astronomers reported strange patterns at the edge of their sector, lights that blinked and then vanished, shadows moving where no planets existed. Some thought it was simple distortion, natural gas clouds or failing sensors. But the reports grew more frequent. Signals crossed their networks. Unidentified energy bursts, short and sharp like distant thunder. Soraya listened to these reports during her meetings, yet each time she waved them away. Our empire has stood for centuries, she said. No shadow in the void can shake us. Her words kept her council calm. But inside she felt a sting of doubt. Elias's voice echoed in her memory. When the enemy comes, they will not ask if you are ready. They will simply burn everything you love. One evening, as the twin moons of Valari Prime rose over her city, Soraya walked along the balcony of her palace. The air was clear, the sky painted with stars. From a distance, the world looked peaceful. But the stars held secrets, and tonight, she saw something that made her stop. A thin streak of light crossed the heavens, burning fast, then splitting into three before fading. She had seen meteors before, but this was different. It was too precise, too controlled. Like ships testing engines in silence the next morning, news arrived from a mining colony near the border. A patrol ship had gone missing. Its last message was cut off mid-sentence. No sign of distress, no wreckage, nothing. The Valari Council laughed again, claiming it was human pirates or simple mechanical failure. But the families of the missing crew did not laugh. Fear began to spread in quiet corners. In the following weeks, trade ships reported strange encounters. Cargo haulers spoke of shadows tailing them through the void. Navigation systems flickered and died without reason. Once, a pilot swore he saw a vast black shape gliding beside his ship, so large it blocked out entire constellations. When he blinked, it was gone. As if the stars had swallowed it, most called him mad. But the terror in his voice could not be denied. Soraya gathered her captains for a meeting in the Grand War Hall. She stood at the head of a long table, maps of star systems glowing before her. Her generals argued, some demanding more patrols, others insisting nothing was wrong. One captain spoke boldly, "Commander, the human may not have lied. These patterns are not normal. We should prepare." But Soraya slammed her hand on the table, her pride unbroken. "I will not shape our empire's future on the words of a human drifter," she said. Her voice silenced the room, though unease remained in their eyes. That night, sleep would not come easily. Soraya dreamed of fire falling from the sky, of towers crumbling and oceans boiling. She woke in sweat, her chest heavy with fear. In the silence of her chamber, she whispered to herself, "Why do his words haunt me still?" Meanwhile, far from Valari Prime, deep space satellites captured something terrifying. Black signals, waves of energy not made by nature, not made by any known empire. They moved in rhythm, like drums before a war march. One young officer tried to send these findings to the council, but his message was intercepted by higher command. Filed away, dismissed. No one wanted panic. No one wanted to admit a human might have been right. On the borders of their empire, small colonies began to vanish. First communication went silent, then no ships returned. Valari citizens demanded answers still. The council claimed it was nothing. They said humans spread fear. They said all was under control, but deep in her heart, Soraya knew control was slipping through her fingers. One late evening, as Soraya reviewed reports in her private chamber, the lights flickered. Screens across the room blinked with static for a moment. Words appeared, symbols she had never seen, sharp, angular shapes that twisted like claws. Then the screens went black when they returned. All systems showed normal, but Soraya knew something had reached into their network, something powerful. Her hands trembled as she remembered Elias's final words. "Your pride will be your downfall, and when the day comes, I will not be surprised." She clenched her fists and forced herself to breathe. She would not show fear, not even in private. Yet for the first time, she wondered if the Valari were not as strong as she believed. The stars outside her window glittered like cold eyes watching her, silent, patient, waiting for the moment to strike. And though she tried to push the thought away, one truth pressed harder with each passing night. The human's warning was not just words. It was a shadow growing closer step by step, unseen but unstoppable. The signs of trouble were no longer whispers. They were screams in the silence of space. And soon no amount of pride would drown them out. The warning signs had grown louder with each passing week. But the Valari still chose to laugh, still chose to trust their pride more than their fear. Even Commander Soraya, though uneasy, kept her face strong before her people. She told them, the Valari are safe, no shadow can harm us. But deep inside, her chest tightened each time she remembered the human's eyes. Then one night the silence of space was broken. It began at the edge of Valari territory, a lonely defense outpost orbiting a red star. The soldiers on duty were bored, their screens filled with nothing but the endless dark. One officer yawned, leaned back in his chair and muttered. Another quiet shift. But then the stars outside flickered, as if something vast had passed between them. At first, the officers thought it was a system error. Then the alarms began to scream. Shapes appeared on the scanners, dozens, then hundreds, moving fast, moving together, black ships sleek and sharp, their hulls darker than the void itself. They did not broadcast signals. They did not announce themselves. They came like hunters, silent, merciless, ready to kill. The outpost commander rushed to his station, shouting for shields and weapons. Energy cannons lit up the skies, beams of light cutting across the darkness. But the black ships did not fall. They moved with strange speed. Twisting and sliding like living shadows, one by one they fired. Their weapons unlike anything the Valari had ever seen. Red lightning tore through shields. Metal walls melted like wax. The outpost shuddered as explosions ripped through its core. Send a distress signal, the commander roared. The message shot across space, racing toward Valari Prime. But before it could finish, a blast hit the transmitter. The signal cut short, leaving only a broken echo. Moments later, the outpost was gone, swallowed in fire. A world of proud warriors destroyed in less than 10 minutes. On Valari Prime, the council awoke to the fragments of that signal. Static, screams, and then silence. Fear spread across the chamber like a cold wind. For the first time, Soraya saw doubt in every leader's eyes. Yet still, one counselor said, it must be pirates. Nothing more, another muttered. Perhaps the humans staged it, trying to scare us, but Soraya's heart told her the truth. She remembered Elias's words. I have seen whole colonies destroyed without a trace. The outpost was only the beginning. She could feel it in her bones. Days later, the attack spread. Mining colonies, trade routes, patrol fleets, all struck without mercy. Ships vanished mid-flight. Stations fell silent, worlds burned. The black ships left no survivors. No messages, only ruin, and worst of all, the enemy never spoke. Never demanded, never explained. They were not raiders. Not conquerors, they were predators. Killing was not their goal. It was their nature. Soraya stood in the war hall staring at the maps each day. More red markers appeared, each one a lost colony. Her captains whispered among themselves. The human was right, one said quietly. Another replied, if only we had listened sooner. But Soraya refused to show weakness. She slammed her hand against the table and shouted, we will fight. We will not bow. Yet in her private chamber she trembled. She could still see the look on Elias's face, the sorrow in his eyes when she ignored him. She whispered into the empty room. You tried to warn me. Her pride cracked. But it was too late to undo what had been done. One night, as she watched the skies from her balcony, the enemy came closer. The black ships entered the system itself, blotting out the stars with their endless numbers. Sirens wailed across the city. Citizens ran through the streets in panic. The Valari defense fleet rose into the sky, brilliant ships of gold and silver. Their engines roared, their weapons lit the heavens. But when the battle began, hope turned to ash. The enemy moved like shadows dancing between the stars. Valari cannons fired beam after beam, but their shots struck nothing but empty space. The black ships twisted, dodged, and struck back with burning red light. Valari ships fell in flames one after another, their proud fleet breaking like glass. From the palace tower, Soraya watched as her skies burned. Her people screamed below, the once proud capital shaking with fear. The human's warning echoed in her mind again and again. When the enemy comes, they will not ask if you are ready. They will simply burn everything you love now. That prophecy was real, unfolding before her eyes. She clenched her fists, tears burning her eyes. Her pride had blinded her, and her people were paying the price. As night fell, Valari Prime's horizon glowed with fire. Whole districts turned to ash, the sky filled with falling debris, and far above, the enemy ships circled like predators, watching, waiting, ready to strike again. The first attack was only the beginning, and in that moment, Soraya finally understood. The human had not spoken to gain power, or to frighten her people. He had spoken because he had seen this future, and now it was hers to face. The night sky above Valari Prime no longer shined with calm stars. It burned with fire, smoke, and falling wreckage. The first attack had been swift and merciless, but the real nightmare was only beginning. The enemy ships hovered like predators above the planet. They moved with silent grace, their dark hulls absorbing the light. Every blast they sent down tore through cities, splitting towers in half, crushing homes. Children cried in the streets. Families ran with no place to hide. The proud capital of the Valari Empire had become a hunting ground. Commander Soraya stood at the palace tower, watching flames rise. Her hands gripped the balcony rail so tight her knuckles turned white. Her once perfect city was breaking apart. Her proud fleets that had guarded the skies for generations now burned like falling stars. The air itself trembled with thunder as ships fell from the heavens. She had promised her people safety, but now screams filled every corner of the city. Shadows of the enemy passed over the streets. Striking with cruel precision, hospitals collapsed. Power stations were erased in seconds. The Valari had believed themselves untouchable, but now their weakness was revealed. Soraya whispered to herself, her voice shaking. This is the price of ignoring him. All across the empire, the destruction spread. Outposts fell silent. Colonies vanished. Fleets returned only as broken wreckage drifting through space. Every world lit by Valari banners now flickered with fire. The enemy gave no warning, no demands, no chance for surrender. They destroyed not for gain but for dominance. To erase, to consume. In the council chamber, panic reigned. Leaders shouted over one another, their voices filled with fear. Move the civilians underground, one cried. Send every last ship we have, another demanded. But even as they argued, fresh reports came in. More cities destroyed, more fleets cut apart. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere. No strategy could stop them. No defense could hold them back. Soraya entered the chamber, her face pale but her eyes burning. She slammed her fist on the great table, silencing the chaos. Enough, she said, her voice sharp. This is no longer a battle for victory. This is a battle for survival. Her words cut through the air, and every leader fell silent. But inside, Soraya knew survival itself was slipping away. The days that followed were filled with ruin. Entire populations fled to caves, tunnels, and hidden bunkers. But the enemy's eyes were everywhere. No matter where people ran, the dark ships found them. Valari children huddled in the dark, asking their mothers, "Will we live?" No mother could answer, for even hope was dying in the skies. The once proud Valari fleet had been reduced to scattered survivors. Captains who once carried themselves with pride now begged for orders. Ships that once gleamed with golden armor now limped through space. Broken and scarred, they sent desperate calls for reinforcements. But no reinforcements came. The empire was crumbling, system by system, day by day, and in the heart of all this chaos, Soraya remembered the human's face, Captain Elias, standing in the chamber, warning her again and again. His words now struck her like blades. When fire falls from the sky, remember the human who tried to warn you. She closed her eyes and whispered into the smoke-filled air. I remember. The brutal consequences were not only death and fire, they were the breaking of pride. The shattering of illusions for centuries. The Valari had believed they were the strongest. Now their people saw them as powerless. Hope drained from the empire like blood from a wound. One evening, Soraya walked among the ruins of her city. She no longer wore her shining golden armor, only a torn cloak stained with ash. Her people looked at her not with respect, but with fear and despair. A child reached out, her small hand shaking. Commander, will the humans help us? She asked in a trembling voice. Soraya froze, her heart twisting. Even the children knew now. Their only chance lay with the very species she had mocked. But Elias was gone, cast out after she rejected him, and no one knew where to find him. Soraya clenched her fists, shame burning in her chest. For the first time in her life, she bowed her head not to a leader, not to a god, but to the truth. The Valari had brought this fate upon themselves, and the brutal consequences of her pride now covered the stars in fire. Night after night, more flames rose into the heavens. Valari Prime trembled under the weight of endless attacks, and Soraya stood in silence, knowing that her people's screams were her burden. The Empire had ignored the humans' warning, and now, piece by piece, it was dying, but even in ruin, one thought refused to leave her mind. If Elias still lived, if humans still had strength, perhaps there was one last chance, not to win, but to survive. The enemy had come to erase them, but maybe humanity, the species she had dismissed, was the only light left in the dark. Valari Prime lay in ruins. The skies were still filled with drifting smoke and broken ships. Fires burned in the distance, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the empty streets. Commander Soraya walked among the rubble, her golden armor now cracked, her once proud cloak torn and covered in ash. She had been strong for so long, but now her steps felt heavy. Every scream reminded her of her failure. Every broken wall whispered the same truth. She had ignored the warning, and now her people were dying. The council no longer met in their shining chamber. That hall had collapsed during the second wave of attacks. What remained of the leaders hid underground, arguing in fear. Some demanded surrender, though no one knew how to surrender to an enemy that never spoke. Others demanded another fleet be raised, though every ship they launched was torn apart within hours. It was chaos, and Soraya knew the Empire was breaking. On the fourth night after the attacks, as Soraya stood on the ruins of the palace, a voice came from behind her. "Still think the shadows are only stories." She froze, her heart racing. She turned quickly, and there he was, Captain Elias, the human she had cast out, standing with dust on his boots and fire in his eyes. For a moment, Soraya thought she was dreaming. The sight of him felt unreal, like a ghost born from her guilt. "You," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I thought you left this world." Elias shook his head, his face cold but calm. "I left the chamber. Not the fight," he said. "Humans do not walk away when death is near." Soraya's throat tightened, shame weighing her down. She remembered her laughter, her arrogance, her dismissal of his warning, and now he stood before her, proven right in every way. She bowed her head slightly, the first time she had shown weakness before a human. "I was wrong," she said, her voice soft. "And now my people pay the price." Elias stepped closer, his eyes scanning the burning horizon. "This is only the beginning," he said. "What you've seen so far is a taste. They will come again, stronger, hungrier." His words struck her like blades, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Then help us," she said quickly, desperation leaking into her tone. "You said you've seen them before. You said you survived. Show us how." For a moment, Elias said nothing. His jaw tightened, and his silence felt heavier than the flames around them. At last he spoke, his voice sharp. "Why should I? Commander, you mocked us, ignored us, cast me out as if my words were nothing." His eyes burned with fury, but behind it was something else, sorrow. "Why should humanity bleed for a people who laughed at us?" Soraya lowered her eyes, her pride breaking at last. "Because without you, we are finished," she whispered. "Because my arrogance has doomed us. But if we fall, these shadows will not stop here. They will spread, and one day they will come for your kind too." Her words trembled, but they were true. The enemy was not a threat to one world or one empire. It was a threat to all life. Elias stared at her for a long moment, his silence deep. Finally he sighed and looked at the burning city again. "You finally see it," he said quietly. "This is not your war. Commander, it is everyone's war." Soraya lifted her head, hope flickering faintly in her chest. "Then you will help us?" she asked, her voice more plea than command. Elias gave a small nod, but his tone was grim. "I will help. But do not mistake this for forgiveness." He stepped forward, his eyes hard. "When humans fight, we fight to the end. We fight with everything we have. But we do not fight for pride. We fight for survival." His words carried a strength that pierced through the despair. And Soraya, for the first time since the attacks began, felt something she had lost: belief. He turned away from the city and looked to the stars. "My ship is hidden in the mountains," he said. "My crew is small, but we know how to hurt these things. We've been running from them for years, learning their weaknesses, bleeding but surviving." He looked back at Soraya, his eyes sharp. "If your people can fight beside us, if you can swallow your pride, we may stand a chance." Soraya straightened, the fire of command returning to her eyes. She nodded once, firm and steady. "Then I will swallow it, Captain, every drop of it, if it means saving even a single child of my people." Her voice was strong again. But it was a new kind of strength, born not from arrogance, but from desperation, and Elias saw it, and for the first time, his expression softened. "Good," he said, "because the next battle is coming soon." He stepped down from the ruins, motioning for her to follow. "Bring what soldiers you can. Bring whoever still has the will to fight. We will need every blade, every cannon, every hand." Soraya followed, her heart pounding. The human had returned, not as a beggar, not as a fool to be ignored, but as the only hope her people had left. Above them in the dark void, the enemy ships began to move again. Their shadows spread across the stars. Signaling the next wave, Soraya tightened her fists, her eyes burning with new resolve. This time she would not stand alone. This time humanity would fight at her side. The mountain air was thin and sharp, carrying the smell of smoke from the burning cities below. Hidden deep inside the cliffs, Elias's ship waited in silence, its dark metal scarred from many battles. Soraya stood at its base, staring at the strange human craft, so different from Valari designs, smaller, rougher, but alive with purpose. Behind her stood a group of Valari soldiers, their golden armor battered, their faces pale from days of fighting. They looked at the human ship with doubt, yet also with desperate hope. Elias stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. "This is the last chance you will get," he said firmly. "If we stand divided, you will all fall. If you fight with us, maybe, just maybe, you will live." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of a man who had seen too much death. Soraya nodded, her voice strong though her heart trembled. "Then we fight with you," she said. "The Valari will stand beside humanity." The human crew emerged from the ship, a small group, no more than 20. They wore worn armor, their faces tired but determined. Some of the Valari soldiers whispered to each other, surprised at how few they were. "How can such a small band fight against an endless enemy?" one muttered. But Elias overheard and answered without hesitation, "Because we know what it takes to survive." Inside the mountain base, humans and Valari gathered around a glowing hollow map. The image showed enemy ships drifting near Valari Prime, their numbers vast. Elias pointed to weak spots with a steady hand. "They move like shadows, but shadows still leave gaps. If you strike here and here, you can break their formation." Valari captains frowned, unaccustomed to listening to a human strategy. But as Elias explained each detail, even the most doubtful began to nod. His knowledge was hard, cold, carved from scars and losses they had never endured. For Soraya, the moment was bitter yet humbling. She had mocked him once, dismissed him before the council. Now, her entire people depended on the same man she had insulted. She lowered her eyes and spoke quietly. "Teach us," she said. "We are ready to learn." Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable. At last he gave a small nod. "Then listen well," he said, "because one mistake, and we all die." Training began the next morning. Humans drilled Valari soldiers in tactics they had never practiced before. No longer did they march with pride in perfect lines. Now they learned to fight in shadows, to strike fast and vanish, to work as one unit instead of many. At first, the Valari struggled, their pride resisting the strange human ways. But as hours passed and losses mounted in practice simulations, they began to understand. Strength without wisdom was weakness, and humanity carried wisdom carved from fire. Soraya herself joined the drills, her golden armor replaced by plain gear. She sparred with human fighters, fell, rose, and fell again. Her body ached, her pride burned, but she did not stop. Each time she rose, Elias's cold eyes followed her, judging but also measuring, and slowly she felt herself grow sharper, faster. Not a commander sitting above her people, but a warrior fighting beside them. At night, by the fires of the mountain camp, the alliance grew. Humans shared their food. Rough and bitter, Valari shared their songs. Low and sorrowful, for the first time, two species that once looked at each other with distrust sat together as one. Fear still lingered, but unity was beginning to bloom. One evening, Soraya sat beside Elias at the edge of the cliff. Below them, the city burned faintly like dying embers. "Do you hate us?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying guilt. Elias took a long breath before answering. "I don't hate you," he said. "I hate the choices you made. I hate that your pride blinded you, but I don't hate your people." His voice softened just slightly. "I've seen too many worlds fall, Soraya. If I hated everyone who ignored me, I'd have no reason left to fight." Soraya looked at him, her eyes heavy with shame. "You saved us anyway," she said. "Even after what I did," Elias shook his head. I didn't save you, he said. I'm trying to save everyone. Because if these things are not stopped here, they will spread across the stars. No one will escape. The next day, scouts returned with grim news. The enemy fleet was gathering again, larger than before. Dark ships massed at the edge of the system. Waiting ready? The camp fell silent as the news spread. Every soldier knew the next battle would decide everything. Elias stood before both humans and Valari, his voice carrying across the camp. This is it, he said. This is where we make our stand. If we fight as strangers, we will fall. If we fight as one, we may still bleed, but we will endure. His words burned in every heart. Even the proud Valari who once laughed at humans now clenched their fists in determination. Soraya stepped beside him, her voice rising. Together, she cried. Valari and humans, two peoples. One fight! The camp roared with voices, soldiers raising their weapons to the sky. For the first time, there was no division. No doubt, only unity. Above them, the stars flickered with approaching shadows. The enemy was coming faster, stronger, hungrier. But this time, Soraya was not alone. This time, humanity stood with her, and together, they would fight not for pride, but for survival. The stars above Valari Prime trembled with movement. Thousands of black ships poured into the system, their hulls darker than the void itself. They stretched across the heavens like a swarm of predators. Blocking out starlight, the enemy had come, stronger and greater than ever before. This was no raid, no test, this was the full strike. The wave meant to erase everything. In the mountain base, alarms screamed. Soldiers rushed to their stations, humans and Valari side by side. Soraya stood at the command platform, her cloak torn but her eyes burning with resolve. Beside her stood Elias, his jaw tight, his voice sharp as he gave orders. This is it, he said. The moment we live or die. The Valari fleet rose into the sky, battered ships reforged with human tactics. Their golden hulls were scarred, their numbers smaller than before. But this time they did not rise in arrogance. This time they rose with discipline, with unity. Every captain carried the same thought. Fight as one or perish as all. The enemy moved first, shadows sweeping forward, their red weapons glowing like hungry eyes. Soraya clenched her fists as she watched. Her people braced themselves for the storm. Elias's voice cut through the chaos, steady and calm. Hold the line. Wait for the gap, he ordered. And when the black swarm struck, the battle exploded, the skies became fire. Valari cannons lit the void with beams of gold and blue. Human weapons fired alongside them, sharp bursts of kinetic rounds tearing through enemy armor. The clash shook the heavens, but for every enemy ship destroyed, 10 more pressed forward. The Alliance fought with everything they had. And for the first time, the enemy ships faltered. They had expected easy prey, but now they faced something different. A desperate united resistance, Soraya's voice echoed through the fleet. Strike together, do not break, she cried. Her ships moved in formations drilled under Elias's command. They weaved between shadows, struck fast and pulled back before the enemy could surround them. It was not perfect. Losses still fell heavy. But it was no longer a slaughter, it was a fight on the ground. Humans and Valari manned defense cannons. Shadows rained fire onto the cities, but the cannons answered. Columns of red energy met walls of gold. Streets shook, buildings fell. But the people did not run this time. They fought with blades, rifles, and their bare hands if needed. The air burned with smoke. The ground shook with thunder. The planet itself seemed to scream with defiance. High above, Soraya's flagship took the center. Enemy fire struck its hull, tearing pieces away, but still it flew. Soraya herself stood on the bridge, shouting orders with fire in her voice. We will not fall, she roared. Not today, her crew answered with cheers, fear burning into fury. Elias's ship darted through the battlefield faster than the Valari craft. His crew struck weak points, breaking enemy formations. He guided the Valari fleet into traps, forcing the shadows to collide with each other. Every move was sharp, every command carved from years of survival. Soraya watched his ship blaze across the stars and thought, this is why they survived when others did not. The battle dragged on, hour after hour. Ships burned, soldiers bled, the Alliance trembled. But still they did not break. The enemy began to shift, pressing harder, pouring more fire into the skies, and just when Soraya thought they could not hold, Elias's voice rang across the comms. Now, he shouted, strike their core. A massive black ship loomed at the center of the swarm. Larger than the rest, its energy pulsed like a beating heart. Red light throbbing across its surface, Soraya's eyes widened. That is their command, she whispered. Elias's voice was hard. If we break it, they will scatter if we fail.
All is lost. With a roar, the Alliance charged.
Volari ships poured every last drop of power into their weapons. Human cannons fired until their barrels glowed white. The flagship trembled under fire, but Soraya refused to stop. Forward, she cried. All power to the cannons. The skies turned into a storm of fire and shadow. Explosions rocked the void, ships shattered into dust at last. A massive blast struck the enemy core. The great black ship groaned. Its red light flickering, Elias's ship dived close. Planting the final strike, a thunderous explosion ripped across the heavens. The black heart shattered, sending shockwaves through the swarm. Silence followed, then chaos. The enemy ships faltered, their formations breaking. One by one, they scattered, retreating into the void. The swarm that had seemed unstoppable was crumbling. The Alliance had held. They had survived the final stand. On the flagship bridge, Soraya fell to her knees. Her chest heaving, her people cheered, voices rising through the wreckage of war. For the first time in weeks, hope filled the air. She lifted her eyes to the stars, still scarred, still burning, and whispered, "We are alive." But even as the cheers rose, Elias's voice remained grim. "They will return," he said quietly. This was one battle, not the end. His words struck Soraya with both fear and truth. Yes, they had survived, but survival was not victory, and the real war had only just begun.